Okay, so this is the return of the FTC scenarios thing we did last season. The FTC we predicted was the most likely, was the one that happened, and we correctly predicted how it would go. We thought it would be a 6-2-2, but it was a 7-3-0. Honestly, quite a good job on that one. Um, I think it's pretty likely I'll do quite well again, hopefully. Uh, the FTC scenario I think is most likely to happen. It's probably Alex Jack Samoyed, which is the fourth one I'll get to. But first, I just want to cover some ground rules. Um, basically, I've taken every single combination of the final five in a three-person final tribal, and I will go through them one by one, pick out who I think votes who, why, and then the vote counts. Um, You will notice a bit of a trend with a lot of these, which is that I think this contingent of about 3 people on the jury will vote the same way in pretty much every scenario. So that kind of leads to these votes not being as interesting as you would hope, which is kind of a shame considering how evenly matched I think this Final Five is gameplay wise. Um, honestly, I don't think we have a Final Five maybe ever that is this evenly matched game wise. I mean, just looking at all past seasons, I think the only season that really comes close would be season 23. But even then, I do feel like there was one outlier in the Final Five in terms of quality of game. But like, if you look at this Final Five, everyone played a great game. And typically, great games that are pretty evenly matched. I mean, typically you'll see one person as an obvious GOAT or obviously the best player. Despite some people not really having many or any scenarios they can win in, I think for the most part, like this is just a damn good Final Five and anyone would be a good winner. That especially with Typo going out last round, who was kind of the only person who I would qualify as a GOAT, but even then they were doing a ton. That's kind of what got them voted out. So, also I am recording this during a fucking Halloween party, I think. So, if there's still people outside my door like there was half an hour ago, my bad guys, I gotta be a niche Z-list internet micro celebrity. But, I don't know how to transition this into the first, scenario, so I'm just gonna dive straight into the first one, which is Alexander versus Garnet versus Jack. And I think I don't remember how I did it last season. Well, like which if I started with the final draw or the first when going through these scenarios. I think it's probably best to do the first, just because I think that's the least interesting way, and it's better to get more interesting as we go on. So that would mean Bass would be the first one voting between Alexander, Garnet, and Jack. But actually is quite an obvious answer for this. I'm filling in the charts as I do this, and the charts will be should be pictured in the video. If not, I will post them myself and put timestamps on when to look for them. But anyway, Bass is a very obvious Alexander vote, in my opinion. And that's entirely based on how he's been enjoying. Bass has pretty much gone on record saying that he thinks Alexander has, if not the best game, the game he wants to vote for the most. And this isn't very surprising if you look back at trust rankings. Of the 3 people left, Alexander was the one Bass was the highest on. Jack was higher at first, but they had voted apart. So by the time Bass went out, Alexander was who he was rooting for. Next up, Knight. That's an obvious Jack vote. Um, Knight would vote between Alexander and Jack, but ultimately Knight was just a big fossil to Jack. And also Knight has been a big fan of Jack on the jury, and some other people have also been a big fan of Jack, which, speaking of, Alexandra is one of those people. A contingent I talked about who will basically always vote together. Alexandra and Knight, the two of them, and then the third person is Georgie, and Natalie is kind of attached to that, but not really. She's attached to it in a bunch of cases, specifically when Jack is at Final Tribal. I think those four vote Jack in probably every scenario, and on a jury of 7, that right there gives him the win. So this is kind of Jack's game to lose. He would have to have really bad FTC to lose at this point, or completely flame out, which I don't think is super likely, because the way the game looks to be now is that Samoyed plays the middle and flips to Alexander and Jack and takes out Yali at 5 and Garnet at 4. That's my idea. Maybe it doesn't go that way. We'll see. Not what I'm covering right now. Natalie's vote. Now, I did just say that she is a part of the contingent that votes Jack, but I do think she would at least consider doing Alexander because of how close they were. But I mean, at the same time, Alexander accidentally voted her out, and if her confessional's anything to go off of, she had said in her confessional yesterday, 27 hours ago, that if Jack is there, she votes Jack. So, Jack vote. Like I said a bit ago, Georgie would vote for Jack, so already Jack wins that scenario. But when looking at the final 3 votes, I think Typo is an Alexander vote. Typo has been very high in Alexander's game, both while in the game and after leaving the game. Alexander is probably the person Typo is the highest on. Yori probably votes Garnet. I mean, just because of how close they are. I think Yori might be the only one who votes Garnet. I think all 3 of these people have a case to get Yori's vote. Garnet and Jack were both pre-game friends that she worked close with, and Alexander was someone she's worked close with in the game. She also did get kind of pissed off at Alexander, and they had a, I wouldn't call it a feud because it wasn't really a feud, but a disagreement that I think she would consider like almost a sympathy vote in a way. But I just don't see it. It's between Garnet or Jack mostly, and Jack hasn't done a good job managing social game with her recently, so I think she votes Garnet. And then Samoyed, his vote could go a bunch of different ways. Actually, no, it couldn't. It's between Alexander and Jack. And honestly, it's not even between them. I think Jack just gets his vote. He's been super close to Jack recently, and yeah, that's kind of the obvious pick in my opinion. Which means that in this scenario, Jack would have 5 votes, Alexander would have 2, and Garnet would have 1. So, first scenario, I think Jack wins it. Alright, second scenario is Alexander, Garnet, and Samoyed. I'm saying it right. If I say Samoyed once, I didn't. That's a mistake. I'm going to say Samoyed, okay? Awesome. So Bass, I mean, right off the bat, I think he votes Alexander in every scenario. I will still comment on that each time we get to it, but yeah. Now that Jack isn't there, I think Knight would vote Alexander. Like, pretty much instantly. Knight will probably vote based on tribal lines, considering how she's been close. I mean, her only allies in the game were her OG tribe, and she was relatively close with all of them who made the merge. So, voting Alexander makes sense. Alexandra, actually, if Jack's there, I'm kind of stumped on who she would vote for. I think ultimately, she's the kind of person who would vote for simply who she liked the most, which would not be Simoid. So it would come down to Garnet or Alexander. This one's tough because she has the connection to Garnet from being on the OG tribe together. They at least have that connection, but She was kind of annoyed with him by the end of the game. And yeah, I mean, that's obviously a bad sign. But she's also kind of dunked on Alexander's game. So it's kind of sort of impossible to pick who I think she would vote for, especially given the fact that she hasn't really given too much of her opinion in the jury. She's kind of just dunked on people, but she's kind of dunked on everyone. So it's hard to make a definitive guess, but I'm gonna say ultimately, given the fact that they have the OG Pim Tribe connection and also Alexander to get to this point would at least some. He's kind of been fumbling recently, so I'm gonna put Alexandra down as a Garnet vote. Natalie would vote, Alexander or Samoy. I think she's the only one who ever would vote Samoy, but I think ultimately, I mean, she's an Alexander vote, even if he voted her out on accident. Georgie has said before that he would never vote Samoyed no matter what, and he's been dunking on Alexander to an insane degree, so I think Garnet basically automatically gets his vote. Hypo votes Alexander for reasons I covered earlier. Yali votes Garnet for, I mean, like I said, reasons I covered earlier. And Jack, I would say, honestly, I could see Jack either voting Alexander or voting for Samoyed. He's been close with Jack all game, but he's been closer to Samoyed recently. Honestly, it truly could go either way. I think he might end up voting whoever gives him more of the time of day. If in this scenario where Jack goes home, which I think in this case would be Alexander, just because Alexander believes he has to go to the end with Jack, while meanwhile Samoyed is kind of willing to go to the end with anyone. So in this case, Samoyed betrays him, which means Jack likely votes Alexander, which means Alexander wins this one in a 5-3-0. If Jack had voted I mean, even if I was gonna say if it tied 4-4, then Samoyed votes Garnet, I guess, on the revote. I'll talk more about Samoyed voting in a scenario with Garnet later, but like it's not even gonna tie, so I won't even get into that. So yeah, like I said, Alexander wins 5-3-0, Garnet second. Alright, third scenario. Including this one, there's 8 more to get through. This is gonna take a bit, but it'll get faster as we go on. And also, unlike last season, I'm doing this alone. Doing it with Ren last season kind of brought up the length of the video a ton. That one was 65 minutes, which is insane. I think this one is running at about 13 at this point, and I would expect it to end between 25 and 30, which honestly good length. I'm kind of going on a tangent here that doesn't matter, but trying to consolidate my thoughts a bit more, which I'm not very good at, if you haven't guessed by me going down this tangent for no reason. Next season also, I would like to have guests on here, so if you're interested, like, let me know. Not even for, like, these specific podcasts I've done, but like other, like, mid-season, I mean, off-season stuff, maybe mid-season recaps, stuff that isn't even related to the org, just reach out if you're interested. Okay. Anyway, back to the scenarios at hand. Bass, like I said, he votes Alexander in every scenario. Except actually, now that I think about it, I think Yalvi could sway his vote. These two were very close in the game. They did have a bit of a falling out by the end. I mean, it wasn't. It was a falling out, and he does feel a bit betrayed by her. But also, they were just so close in the game that I feel like if she manages him well in questioning, which I think is likely, she very well could get his vote back. But it's a situation where Bass has been one of Alexander's biggest supporters since the very beginning of his time on Joy, and I think also Alexander played a game that Bass wanted to play, one that has loyalty and is a hero who never gave up, which is something we saw with Bass. I mean, quite literally throwing away his game to try and protect Typo at the final 11, which we saw how that went. I mean, it's the reason why Bass is on the jury. So, I think just because of the game Alexander has played versus the more cutthroat game Yali has played, I think Bass's vote, once again here, would go to Alexander. But like I explained, there is some nuance to that. Knight votes Alexander, just based on the OG tribe connection. Alexandra, I don't think she would vote Alexander, so it comes down to Garnet and Yali. I think she really respects the game that Yali has played. I think everyone kind of does. The Joy consensus right now is that she's played the best game, but not everyone wants to vote for the best game. I mean, you see people tend to vote for who they like the most, both online and in person survival. So for that reason, Alexandria can go anywhere. Any scenario that doesn't have Jack, her vote is just up in the air. So I think part of it comes down to who would Knight and Georgie vote. Knight votes Alexander. Georgie, I think, doesn't vote Alexander. So it's not getting me anywhere to go by that logic. So I think ultimately, all I can do is, like I said, I don't think she does Alexander. So if it comes down to Garnet and Yali, God, they had the close bond early on OG Tribes. And they is in reference to Alexandra and Garnet. But I think just with the way Yali has been talked about, I think people would respect her game. So for that reason, I'm gonna give this vote to Yali. Natalie votes Alexander because of how close they were. Georgie votes anyone but Alexander. I think he votes Yali though because he wasn't the closest to Garnet, and Yali's played such an obviously good game. Typo votes for Alexander for obvious reasons I've previously outlined. Samoyed, tough one. I think Samoyed has worked with all these people in close duos at least one point in the game or another, but he has also betrayed all of these people at least one point in the game or another. I think Samoyed is also someone who's very strategic player, and he's gonna vote for who he thinks played the best game. And especially after he kind of played Alexander this last round, and how he thinks Alexander was someone he could beat in the end, I think he would vote for who he deems one of the bigger threats, which would be Garnet or Yali, and between the two, I think Yali takes that more. Jack, on the other hand, I don't know why I said on the other hand, because, I mean, honestly, I think he votes the same way. I think Jack is a vote for Yali, which actually creates a very interesting scenario, because this would actually be a vote for FTC, which has only happened twice before, hasn't happened in a while, happened Season 10 and Season 7, both 550 votes, third placer broke the tie, and well, I'm kind of stalling for time as I set the chart up, but I've done it now. On it votes between Alexander and Yali here. And, well, I think... I guess I should reorganize the chart in this scenario, just given how this shook out. So I'm going to keep stalling for time, but I mean, I think it's quite, frankly, obvious who Garnet would vote for in this scenario. I mean, he was close to Yali pregame. So, she would win this in a 5-4-0, which I believe that I'll look through now and see if we predicted any tie votes last season. And well, either way, I'm seeing one. I'll see if there's more than one. Yeah, no, the only tie vote we predicted last season was between. I've misplaced it. Okay, High Space, Jonah, and Palco. And we predicted that'd be 5-5 between High Space and Palco, and that Jonah would vote high and break the tie. And while looking at that, I noticed that I did not reformat the tie. I mean, the chart for scenario where there is a tie, so I'm gonna format it back. But yes, Garnet votes Yali, she wins 5-4-0. Okay, fourth scenario. Alexander Jack Samoyed. Um, I think, which by the way, a different person has won every scenario. Jack won the first, Alexander won the second, Yali won the third. But Alexander was competitive, and that's all. But anyway, fourth, Alexander Jack Bass, as always. Sorry, I don't know why I said Bass. Alexander Jack Samoyed. But Bass, that's why I said Bass, would vote for Alexander, as I've outlined previously. Knight would vote for one of her friends from our OG tribe. It would come down to Alexander or Jack. But as I have covered previously, I think in the first scenario, she would be a Jack vote. Alexandra would also be a Jack vote for reasons previously covered. Natalie would be a Jack vote for reasons previously covered. And so would Georgie, which, I mean, this is what I mean by that contingent who will always vote Jack and basically decisively give him the victory. Hypo votes Alexander for reasons outlined previously. And I mean, this is why I said these will go faster as it goes on. I mean, most of the reasons at this point are just reasons I've already given. I haven't really given many scenarios where Yali votes, though. And every time she did, it was an easy Garnet vote. And Garnet isn't in this scenario. And this is also the most likely scenario. So I think this is one where you really gotta think who Yali votes for. That I think ultimately, even if the relationship has been rocky recently, Jack was a pregame friend, and they have worked in this game together longer than she has with the other two. And then finally, Garnet, I think, votes for Alexander because they've been closer all game than he was to the other two. So that means this would be a 5-3-0, Jack Alexander Samoyed. So that would be the second scenario where Jack would win. On to the fifth scenario, which would be best case scenario. In my opinion, the three best games in the final three: Alexander, Jack, Yali. Maybe not the three best when I think about it, but I think this would be the most competitive, is a better way to put it. I think all three of them have chances at getting votes, and I mean, I'll just dive right into it. Yes, I think he would be conflicted between Alexander and Yali for reasons I have outlined before, as I've said many times. Rhythm when I said that. My segues today are kind of crazy. I just know what to say today, so that's fucking huge. Everyone, I don't know, say good job? Maybe my segues are kind of ass today, actually. Anyway, Bass votes Alexander. You should know this by now. Knight votes Jack. You should know this by now. Alexandra votes Jack. You should know this by now. And then so do Natalie and Georgie. So, that means, I mean, Jack has already won the game, unless Alexander can get these last three. And I think Alexander gets Typo's vote. Samoyed votes Jack. They bonded recently. So that means Jack wins. And Garnet, I also don't think would even vote Alexander. He would vote Yali, which means this would be a 5-2-1 in Jack's favor, with Yali getting the least votes. Which, it's funny, because the Joy consensus is that she is playing the best game right now, but also I just don't think she gets the votes in this case. Alright, sixth scenario, Alexander, Samoyed, Yali. I think this is an interesting one, because here we kind of see the contingent broken up a bit, because Jack isn't there for them all to dogpile votes on. And all of their votes would split between Alexander and Yali, and I think they have differing opinions on them. But get the obvious answers out of the way. Bass votes Alexander. First member of the contingent, Night. She would vote Alexander for the OG tribe connections. Alexandra, I think, votes Yali. Well, like I said, reasons I've outlined earlier. She would never vote Samoyed in any scenario, no matter what, so that's not even a question. Natalie, I could see her going actually just any way. But if I had to pick one, I'm going to say Alexander, just because of how close they were throughout the game. Georgie has gone on record saying he would never vote Alexander or Samoyed, so Yali gets the vote automatically. Hypo votes Alexander for reasons outlined before. Jack. I have covered this before between who Jack would vote if it's between Alexander and Yali, and I'm gonna say Yali. I don't know why I paused. I just knew I would go that way. Um, Beltner also votes Yali, which means we have a 4-4-0 again, which means I gotta change the chart a little bit, because I am making these while I do these, so I gotta kinda reformat this as I speak, but God, Samoyed, would he vote Alexander or Yali? I'm gonna go into his confessional and scroll. So I did a good on who he thinks played the better game. I don't think he respects Alexander's game just with looking it up now. I just don't think he does. He's outplayed Alexander. And also in other scenarios, I had Samoyed. Actually, never mind. Actually, yeah. In other scenarios, I've had Samoyed voting Yali over Alexander. So I'm gonna say Samoyed votes Yali over Alexander. So far we've had 2 different ties, which is more than I projected last season, which is cool. Alexander has beaten... Actually, never mind. Every scenario with both Alexander and Yali, which I've noticed both of them had the vote shake out the same way. The only difference was the third placer was different, but the third placer in both scenarios voted Yali. So, interesting to note. Sixth scenario, I believe. Or was it the 7th? It's the 7th. Wow, okay, I'm knocking these out faster now. As I said I would. How are we doing on time? 29 minutes, okay. Already longer than I expected to go. Shit. I mean, it doesn't matter, but yeah. Uh, Bass. Well, now thought Alexander wasn't there. He can't vote him. Y'all, oh, did I say what the scenario was? I might have missed mentioning what the scenarios were a few times now, so the images on screen should help with that. But just to say it, Garnet Jack Samoyed, sorry, is this one. And if Alexander isn't there for Bass to vote, and Yali isn't there for Bass to vote, fuck if I know who Bass would vote for. Actually, I should know, because I believe he has talked about this. So give me a quick moment to look at that. Okay, he says that he thinks the best game of this group would be Samoyed or Garnet, based on his confessional exactly a week ago. I do think it is very possible this opinion would have changed by now. I think. Oh, this is a tough one. Very high in goal in its game based on recent talk. I don't think he would vote Samoyed with how anti-Samoyed the Joy has been, so I think that's just a Jack vote. Knight is also an easy Jack vote. Alexandra is also an easy Jack vote. Natalie is also an easy Jack vote. And Georgie is an easy Jack vote. So that is a definitive Jack win. I mean, he doesn't. A tie couldn't change things. Because a tie is impossible. He just wins. Um, Hypo, like Bass, was someone who was always going to vote Alexander, but now we have gotten to scenarios that don't include Alexander in them, so Typo's vote is up in the air again. I would who they want a final three with in the end game, and also just not who voted them out. So for that reason, Typo also votes Jack. I think Yali votes for Gonit because of their connection. And then I think Alexander votes Jack. So, in very, and he does that because they've had a good connection throughout the entire game. They were super close early on. They hit that connection. Jack told Alexander about his extra vote. And then they've just been a final two for basically the whole match. So, this comes out to a 7-1-0. Very new era survival in that sense. 41 through 44 all had 7-1-0 FTC votes, and well, so does this one. So that's interesting. Uh, 45 and 46, just to put it on the record, were both 5-3-0s. You don't need to know that, but there it is. There was two 5-3-0s predicted in this video, which would be if it was Alexander, Garnet, and Samoyed in the final three, and Alexander, Jack, and Samoyed. Okay, 8th scenario. 3 left counting this one. Bass. Would Bass vote Garnet, Jack, or Yali? And I think Yali would win him over in this case. I mean, they were really close. For a while, Bass was kind of just doing everything Yali said. So I think, I mean, Yali can win him. Knight votes for Jack. And then so do the rest of the contingent. Alexandra, Natalie, Georgie. Typo, I think, also votes for Jack. I think Samoyed probably also votes for Jack, just because Samoyed is a big positioning head. And I think Jack is the one who see as having the better positioning. And he also kind of has been at odds with Jack a few times. I'm not locked in on who Samoyed would vote, but I'm gonna say Jack. Am I gonna say Jack? I mean, Jack wins regardless, but before I plug Samoyed in, I'm gonna say that Alexander votes Jack. Obvious. Okay, Samoyed. Who does Samoyed vote? Not going it. And not. God, why am I struggling with this one so much? It shouldn't be that hard, but it kind of fucking is. God, why am I? Hmm. I've had him vote for previously. Previously voted for Yali over a few people, but not over Jack. So I'm gonna say he votes for Jack, which would make this another 7-1-0, second in a row. Alright, second to last scenario. Bass, I think he votes for Yoli. Knight. Okay, so Knight's voting is very much so based on OG tribes, and this is the one scenario that does not involve anyone from her OG tribe, so she could vote for anyone. I think she probably would vote on perceived best game, which would be Yoli, and also they have the connection of I think they got along. Maybe I'm making that up. I could totally have made that up, but I thought they did have a bit of a relationship. And also, Garnet and Samoyed both targeted her pretty hard. I mean, so did Yarly, but Samoyed especially was kind of a figurehead of that. Alexandra would never vote Samoyed, so her vote would be between Garnet and Yarly. And I think I would assume Yarly. Yeah, I'm gonna put that down as a Yarly vote. Natalie, I think, would consider between Samoyed and Yarly. And between the two, I'm probably gonna go Yarly. Yarly. Um, maybe, maybe Samoyed has a case. Actually, you know what? I think I might go Samoyed. I think this is also the only vote I have Samoyed getting in any case. So that's interesting. But I just feel Natalie was simply just more connected to Samoyed. And I think in this scenario, it's kind of a bygone conclusion that Yarly wins this. So I think Natalie would vote for Samoyed, kind of out of a respect thing. Georgie, I think, would vote for Yarly here. Typo. Probably. Oh, wow. I think Typo. I don't know why I said it like that. I think Typo would vote Samoyed too, actually. I, I think they had the early game connection, and they've been closer recently. So, yeah, I think, actually, yeah, Samoyed gets 2 votes in this scenario. Unfortunately, can't tie it, because I think Jack votes Yarly. And I guess I would say Alexander votes for not Samoyed. So it comes down to Garnet or Yarly. And I mean, he has been closer to Garnet throughout the game. They have drifted apart a bit recently, but I mean, they were still close for a very significant portion of the game. I do think he believes Yarly might have the. I don't even know if he would think Yarly would have the better game. I'm gonna say he's a Garnet vote, just because of their connection, which would make this a 5-2-1. Yarly wins. And then finally, the final scenario would be Jack, Samoyed, and Yarly. And I think this is a pretty easy one. I've covered everyone's reasons for why they would vote, who they would vote before, so just to fire them off quick, Bass would vote Yarly, Knight would vote for Jack, Alexandra would vote for Jack, Natalie would vote for Jack, Georgie would vote for Jack, so he already won. Typo. I guess I haven't outlined who Typo would vote here. But I'm gonna go on a limb and say Typo would vote Jack. My microphone did the famous disconnecting thing, so that's fun. So fun little pause. Typo votes Jack. Yeah. Garnet votes Yarly, and Alexander votes Jack. So that means Jack takes this one 6-0. And then the final thing to cover scenarios each person wins. So I'm gonna need a moment to tally that one up, so I'm just gonna yap for a minute. If that's alright. If it isn't, I mean what are you gonna do about it? So there's 10 scenarios in all. Jack wins every single one he's in. And well, everyone's in 6. So Jack has a perfect track record here. last season, no one had a perfect track record. The only person who did, I mean, the person who was the closest was High Space, who was one off because he lost against Palco in one scenario. Yalzi wins in 1, 2, 3 scenarios, which means Alexander has 1 winning scenario, and Garnet and Samoyed have 0 winning scenarios. I do think Alexander is kind of in a case where he could sway some votes against Yarley to maybe win that battle. And even if Yarley has more winning scenarios, I think Alexander is way more likely to make it to the end and also more likely to sway votes. And my findings in here, I mean, this is why I haven't done Edgic and Power Rankings yet, is that I wanted to look at my findings here and then decide, okay, who's the top contender, who's the bottom. And I think, based on that, I'm going to say the least likely to win is actually Garnet. 24 hours ago, even 48 hours ago, I was going to say Samoyed would be the least likely to win. Because Samoyed is the one that George's lowest on. Which even then, I think you could argue that's... Never mind, that's still the case. But I think there's at least a chance of an argument of that no longer being the case. Because I think, well, not even that. I don't know where I'm going with this. But I think, Samoyed is also just way more likely to make it to the end, because Samoyed is basically situated as the Swain between 2 duos. For that reason, so that just makes sense, you know? So, Garnet is 5th. I don't see Garnet making it to the end in any scenario, even if they have a better chance of beating Samoyed, but, like, this season isn't a final 2, so there's just nothing there. So Garnet 5, Samoyed 4, and then Yarley 3, Alexander 2, and Jack 1. So with that, I mean, that's pretty much everything I want to cover, I think. Danny just he just finished the thumbnail for this, so that's awesome. Thanks, Danny. This is clocking in at about 45 minutes, which is into 20 more minutes than I thought this would be. About 20 minutes off from when it was last season. But yeah, no, I find these types of videos fun. It's a good thought exercise for me. Hopefully hopefully I didn't have to piss off everyone living around me by talking about whatever the fuck this was. Yeah, I mean, this is the last video for this season while it airs, I guess. I mean, it is, but I just said I guess in regards to airing, because like it doesn't air because it's not. Yeah, whatever. But a player ranking will be coming out, but it will be after the Legends player ranking, just because I've been saying that would come out for months and I just haven't fucking done it. So I'll do that eventually, and then season 25 will probably come out like a week or two later. I might even record the 2 of them in one day, but I would wait a bit to release 25 just so they would come out like at least a bit of time between the 2. And then afterwards, I'll start making my way to 23 and back. But like, if 26, like for example, if I have 23 through 25 done, but then 26 ends, I would then do 26 instead of 22. And then, yeah, just keep that same pattern up. But yeah, that's the final thing I had to say, and I don't really want to scramble to think of an outro, so I'm just gonna fucking end it. Okay, awesome.